Hello everyone and welcome to the Commexis Cast Daily, all the news you need to know from our inbox to yours. Today we're talking about Facebook not extending the GDPR regulations globally for its privacy settings, and we'll explain what the GDPR is and what those regulations are if you don't know what they are. And Instagram was going to limit how much information developers are going to be able to pull from its API. Hello everyone, I'm Matthew McGrorty, the videographer and podcaster here at Commexis, and today I'm joined by the lead strategist at Commexis, Phillip Brooks.
Good morning.
So our story for today, Facebook announced yesterday in an interview with Reuters, Mark Zuckerberg was interviewed by Reuters, David Ingram, and Joseph Men, and he said that while he agreed with the spirit of the new GDPR European Union law and its privacy restrictions, that he will not be expanding those restrictions as the standard for the social network going forward globally. So just generally speaking, the GDPR is a European Union law that was passed recently that basically offers users in Europe who are affected by it better privacy protection. So basically you're able to know what brands have on you, so the information they have on you, and you also have the right to have that information deleted. In addition, there's some other things, how long somebody's able to track you with like cookies and pixels and stuff like that. But that's the gist of it. Basically, you're allowed to know what information has been gathered on you, and you're also allowed to be able to have that deleted, among many other things. So this is, I think, an interesting statement from Zuckerberg following the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which was all about user privacy and stuff like that. So I guess first we should talk about, generally, what do we think about this?
Well, I think the first thing to consider here is that in this context, the GDPR wouldn't necessarily have prevented what occurred with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, simply because that was done, or that data was gathered under what they call an academic license. So that information gathered was not authorized to be used in the way that it was used anyway, which we talked a little bit about in the previous, in our kind of special report on the Cambridge Analytica stuff.
And in addition to that, it was gathered by Cambridge Analytica other than just under the academic license, it was also gathered in a very sort of illegal, non-consensual way, which in this case, if this was the GDPR, it would be Cambridge Analytica probably that would be under fire there and not Facebook.
So just keep that in mind, that while this sounds like it might be some sort of, thumbing their nose at the scandal, in the context of the GDPR, they wouldn't have been held responsible for the breach in the first place, because they did follow their own protocols and procedures on how that data was released and how it was gathered. So just to give you, and this is something that people have tried to get out in front of. We know that Apple, for example, they do delete tracking pixels within 24 hours as they're applied to Safari, for example. But as far as Facebook goes, this is a huge portion of the revenue stream, the ability to monetize the user data of anybody that's on the platform. So for them to start giving people the ability to opt out of that, or to fully view who actually has what data on them, could be disastrous for the platform going forward. I think that people really don't understand exactly how much of their freedom and their information is sacrificed for the ability to read your crazy uncle's racist rants. So just remember that this is something that you're doing. This is your quid pro quo for the ability to use social media. Is you're giving up that social information about yourself, and if you go into it with that that mindset, you'll be a lot more understanding of what kind of risks are being posed for you. So just remember that you're a valuable demographic, and your information therefore is also valuable, because it allows them to figure out who to sell your name to and who would be interested in necessarily marketing to you.
Yeah, and one thing we mentioned in our special report last week was that a lot of the information that is gathered by Facebook is kept anonymous for people who are trying to advertise. So you might be able to target demographics, but we're not being told specific information about them. We also mentioned before that there was that very small exploit where you could kind of try and figure something out, but that also got fixed and was probably never used either.
And as far as we know, that was not something that people were exploiting. But again, as with any platform of this size and this scope where billions of people are on it, there's going to holes are going to be found, and it's just going to be a matter of who finds them first whether it's a good guy or a bad guy.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important distinction as well.
I also want to touch on the point you made about, the point of Facebook being free is that somehow they have to figure out a way to monetize it. There was a really great article that I tweeted out earlier today, and also put in the description of the blog post description of this podcast, with Ezra Klein on Vox was speaking with Mark Zuckerberg, and they talked about the difference between a pay to get on model and something that is ad based, which is what Facebook is, and sort of the pros and cons of that, because Tim Cook's been giving some pretty intense heat towards Zuckerberg.
And Zuckerberg fired right back.
Yes.
If you saw that. So just keep in mind that these two have very different definitions of how these things are meant to be monetized, and I think that's part of the reason why Apple hasn't really jumped both feet first into the social media game.
Yeah, that's true. So Mark Zuckerberg gave a statement to Reuters in their interview. He said, "We're still nailing down details on this, but it should directionally be in spirit, the whole thing, in spirit of GDPR." So he said that he did not elaborate on what that meant. He also told Reuters that Facebook is already compliant with many of the GDPR restrictions. So for example, you're able to see how much data Facebook has on you, and you're also able to, according to Zuckerberg, ask for it to be deleted. I obviously don't know the extent of the deletion process, but I do know that if you go into your settings, you're able to download a whole zip file of all of the stuff that you've
honestly, I went through that. I know you talked about it briefly in one of the other podcasts that we did last week, but I went through it and I didn't find anything all that terrifying. There wasn't, maybe it's because I've always been a little leery of how social media works, in that, so I don't put a lot of stuff on there other than just, jokes with my friends and stupid memes and things like that. But that kind of thing, where it's integrated into your friends list, where it knows when you send texts and that kind of thing. I mean, your phone company keeps that same data, and it can be, it's not like it's immune from being summoned as a part of a summons if you're, going through a divorce or whatever, something like that. So, the usability of that information is simply just, I just don't know what the complaints are for that. You can figure out where people were at a certain time of day, I guess, if you really wanted to learn that. You want to learn somebody's commute or something like that. But
I obviously I think it's one of those things with you're mentioning the Android. If you had an Android phone and you gave consent to Messenger to basically sync with your contacts, they were able to tell, when you sent certain texts, what times, timestamps of phone calls and stuff like that. And I think that's what you're referencing. I understand why that would be abrasive to some people, or odd to some people rather, just because they probably just didn't realize Facebook.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know why they're compiling that data in the first place, but I don't think anybody's found a use for it yet, really.
Yeah, I don't know.
Unless they sync it up with your location settings.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, a similar story to Facebook and privacy. Instagram, the Facebook-owned company, is going to be limiting how much data some developers can collect from its API. And this is from Kurt Wagner on Recode.
Nightcrawler. Yeah. Nightcrawler's real name is Kurt Wagner.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There you go. Something I didn't know. So on Friday, Instagram had apparently suddenly changed its API platform, which decreased the number of times a developer could use the API to ping Instagram for updated information, according to conversations that Recode and Kurt Wagner had with multiple developers. So the rate limit for Instagram's platform use was 5,000 calls per hour, but was suddenly reduced to 200 calls per hour on Friday. So what that basically means is how often developers are able to pull and ping information from Instagram for whatever it is that they are using it for. So for example, customer service and brand marketing companies, they tend to ping a lot to get a lot of stuff from Instagram. So that we'll also be able to limit the total volume of information that outsiders have access. And basically, developers are going to have to be pickier about what information that they're pulling, because
or how often
because they have less opportunities to pull that information. So this is mostly a surprise, because Instagram told developers that they were going to be doing this slowly, and by about 2012 it would have like fully reduced it. But I think in the aftermath of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, I can see why they would want to do this so soon.
At least in my opinion, usually there's only two reasons why you would start doing this. One would be it's somehow impacting server performance, where it's impeding data from users to getting through, so it's slowing things down. That I would think that their servers are optimized enough that wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
But the second piece is usually that there's some sort of third-party application or tool that's pulling data out and either putting it together as a dashboard or compiling it in some other way that would subvert the analytics that they provide to their own users, and therefore kind of makes them the middleman instead of the end user when it comes to analytics being harvested from the platform. Usually, for example, SEMrush or some of those kinds of things, have been nailed for doing this with Facebook, that kind of thing. So I would suspect that that's possibly and also a reason behind it. Certainly, we don't know exactly why they did that, but those, in my opinion, are usually the two reasons why this kind of thing happens.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think another reason might also be that because you only have 200 pings compared to 5,000, there's less data that can be pulled because you just have less opportunities to pull data. So probably they're pulling less. They're pulling less relevant data. Just because they can.
Yeah, I mean, it makes the developers be a little more choosy with what they're pulling out, but you just have to wonder how many developers are working on apps that are pulling direct data through that API portal. How many people can be, because if there's a dozen, 500 calls isn't that bad. If there's 100, I can see that being a problem. But honestly, I have no idea how many people are currently working on an app that would harvest data through their API, but who knows?
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to today's episode of the Commexis Cast Daily. Check us out tomorrow for more of the latest trending news. Have a great day.